Carol Burnett entered the world in a place that would later feel almost symbolic of her life's central contradiction, a cramped environment where chaos and imagination coexisted in constant tension. The one-room Hollywood apartment on North Wilcox Avenue was not designed for comfort or aspiration, it was designed for endurance. In that space, adulthood unraveled nightly through alcohol-fueled arguments, while a child learned to interpret silence, tone, and broken glass as a kind of language. The world outside Hollywood shimmered with promise, but inside, promise rarely lasted past morning. Her early years were shaped less by milestones and more by absences. The absence of stability, the absence of dependable affection, and eventually the absence of both parents in any meaningful sense. What remained was her grandmother, who became caretaker not out of abundance, but out of necessity. The apartment itself became a stage long before performance entered her life. Every sound amplified, every emotion unavoidable, every moment witnessed whether she wanted it or not. In that environment, imagination became a survival tool rather than a luxury. Films seen in nearby theaters offered temporary escape, but also instruction, teaching her how laughter could coexist with sadness, how stories could reshape suffering into something survivable. Even then, without language for it, she was already learning the central truth that would define her. Pain does not vanish when ignored, it transforms when expressed. Childhood fractures and Hollywood shadows. The instability of Carol's childhood was not a single rupture, but a series of accumulating fractures that never fully healed before the next one arrived. Her parents drifted in and out of her life with the unpredictability of weather systems, each return carrying both hope and disappointment. Alcohol blurred responsibility until promises became indistinguishable from excuses. Eventually, custody dissolved into indifference, and she was left in the care of her grandmother, a woman who provided shelter but not escape from poverty. The Hollywood surroundings created a cruel contrast. Glamorous streets only blocks away from an existence defined by scarcity. School became a place where difference was quietly cataloged by others. Clothes worn too often, lunches too modest, explanations never given. Yet within that environment, something began to form that was not resignation, but observation. She learned to study people closely, to read behavior the way others read books. Teachers noticed flashes of something unusual, timing, mimicry, emotional intelligence that seemed disproportionate to her age. But these qualities developed alongside a deep internal skepticism about permanence. Nothing, she learned early, stayed intact. Not families, not promises, not even the sense that tomorrow would resemble today. That belief, though painful, would later become the foundation of her resilience on stage, where unpredictability was not a threat but a medium she could shape, the girl who found her voice in darkened theaters. Escape arrived not as relocation but as ritual. Movie theaters became sanctuaries where the constraints of her daily life temporarily dissolved. In those dim rooms, stories unfolded that contradicted everything she knew. Families reunited, misunderstandings resolved, and suffering resolved into narrative meaning. For a child whose reality offered few resolutions, this structure was transformative. She studied performers not as distant figures but as apprentices study masters, absorbing rhythm, timing, and emotional calibration. Laughter became particularly significant, not because it erased pain, but because it suspended it long enough to breathe. Outside the theater, life resumed unchanged, but something internal had shifted. She began to understand that performance was not deception, it was translation. Emotions too heavy to carry directly could be reshaped into something shared. This realization did not immediately improve her circumstances, but it altered her internal map of possibility. Even in poverty, she began to recognize that expression could be a form of agency. At school, drama classes offered structured access to that agency. Teachers noticed her instinctive grasp of comedic timing and emotional truth. She was not yet aspiring to fame or recognition. She was simply discovering that her inner life, previously unspoken, could be given form and returned to the world in altered shape. Scholarships, strangers, and the leap to UCLA. The transition to UCLA marked the first moment where circumstance briefly bent in her favor, though not without fragility. Admission itself did not resolve the deeper issue of survival. She still carried the financial uncertainty of someone who had never known stability. The campus was filled with contrasts that quietly reinforced her sense of difference. Students who spoke casually about travel, security, and familial support, while she calculated expenses in real time. Yet within the theater department, she encountered something unfamiliar: structured encouragement. Training replaced improvisation, critique replaced survival instinct, and for the first time, her instincts were refined rather than merely deployed. She learned discipline in craft, but also discovered that her emotional depth, shaped by instability, translated into compelling performance. The defining moment of this period was not a singular breakthrough, but an accumulation of recognition from instructors who saw in her a rare combination of vulnerability and precision. When financial continuation became uncertain, an unexpected act of generosity altered her trajectory, allowing her to remain enrolled. That intervention, small in origin but large in consequence, reinforced a belief she would revisit often: that survival is sometimes collective rather than solitary. Leaving UCLA for New York was not framed as ambition at the time, but as necessity paired with uncertainty, a continuation of motion rather than a declaration of arrival. New York beginnings and the edge of obscurity. New York did not greet her with clarity or success, but with anonymity. The city functioned as both opportunity and obstacle, offering endless stages while demanding relentless endurance. Early months were defined by instability, temporary housing, inconsistent work, and auditions that ended in polite dismissal. Yet beneath the surface of rejection, a pattern began to form: persistence without guarantee. She worked through fatigue, navigated financial precarity, and continued performing in whatever capacity was available. Each small role became both rehearsal and test. Gradually, television exposure and minor stage opportunities began to accumulate, not as sudden transformation but as incremental visibility. The entertainment industry, often indifferent to unproven talent, began to recognize a presence that could not be easily categorized. Her ability to combine humor with emotional sincerity distinguished her from performers who specialized in only one register. Still, success remained fragile, contingent on timing and chance. Even early television appearances did not immediately resolve the uncertainty of her position. Instead, they reinforced a paradox: recognition could increase visibility without guaranteeing stability. In this environment, she developed a professional identity shaped by adaptability rather than certainty, learning to navigate an industry where momentum was often temporary and opportunity rarely symmetrical. Broadway breakthrough and the Shape of a Star Broadway provided the first sustained recognition of her range, transforming her from working performer into emerging figure of national interest. In productions such as Once Upon a Mattress, she demonstrated an unusual synthesis of comedic precision and emotional resonance. Critics responded not only to technical skill but to presence, an ability to command attention without excess. This period marked a shift in how she was perceived, no longer simply a performer capable of moments of brilliance, but an artist capable of sustaining them across an entire production. The demands of stage performance also reinforced her resilience. Unlike film or television, theater required repetition without degradation of energy, night after night, regardless of personal circumstance. Success brought new pressures, expectation replaced obscurity, and visibility introduced scrutiny. Yet Broadway also solidified her professional identity in a way earlier experiences had not. It demonstrated that her instincts, shaped by hardship, were not liabilities but assets within structured performance. Importantly, this success did not erase uncertainty, rather it reframed it. She was no longer struggling for opportunity, but learning how to inhabit it without losing the emotional raw material that made her work distinctive. Television calling and the risk of a new medium, television in the 1960s, was still defining its boundaries, particularly regarding women in leading comedic roles. When opportunities emerged, they carried both promise and skepticism. The proposal for a female-led variety program was, at the time, unconventional to the point of risk. Industry assumptions suggested that audiences preferred male hosts for sustained comedic formats. Accepting such a role meant not only performing but also testing cultural expectations in real time. The transition from stage to television required adaptation, Intimacy replaced projection, subtlety replaced theatrical exaggeration. Yet her background allowed her to navigate this shift with unusual fluency. She understood audience psychology from live performance, and she understood emotional pacing from both hardship and training. Early development of the program involved experimentation with structure, tone, and format, blending sketch comedy with musical performance and audience interaction. The result was not immediately guaranteed success, but it carried a distinctive identity shaped by her willingness to blend vulnerability with humor. In this phase, she was not merely executing a concept, but helping define a genre that had not fully existed before her participation in it. A revolution called the Carol Burnett Show. When Carol Burnett Show premiered, it did more than introduce a program, it redefined expectations of television comedy. The format combined sketches, musical numbers, and direct audience engagement, anchored by her presence as both performer and host. What distinguished the show was not just its structure but its emotional range. Comedy sketches often contained underlying vulnerability, while musical performances carried narrative weight beyond entertainment. The ensemble cast contributed significantly to its dynamic energy, with performers such as Tim Conway and Vicki Lawrence helping create a collaborative environment where improvisation and spontaneity were not only permitted but encouraged. Over time, the show developed a cultural footprint that extended beyond ratings. It became a shared reference point for audiences navigating personal hardship, offering structured laughter during periods of social and individual uncertainty. Its longevity reflected both creative consistency and adaptability. Behind the scenes, the workload was intense, requiring constant development, rehearsal, and performance refinement. Yet the show endured because it balanced precision with unpredictability, allowing moments of unscripted humanity to become part of its identity. The weight of success behind the curtain success, once achieved at scale, introduced complexities that were less visible to audiences. The demands of sustaining a long-running variety program required not only creative output but emotional endurance. The schedule was relentless, and the expectation of consistency left little room for personal fluctuation. While the audience experienced laughter, the production environment required discipline bordering on exhaustion. Relationships within the cast became essential for maintaining cohesion, yet even camaraderie could not eliminate pressure. Fame also altered external relationships, creating distance between professional identity and personal life. Marriage, family responsibilities, and creative obligations often competed for limited emotional bandwidth. The contradiction became increasingly apparent. A life dedicated to producing joy for millions often involved private depletion. Yet stepping away was not immediately viable, as success generated its own momentum. The show's acclaim reinforced responsibility, particularly as it became a cultural fixture. Awards and recognition validated the work publicly, but internally they did not resolve the tension between visibility and personal cost. This period represents not collapse, but accumulation, the gradual layering of achievement and strain, each reinforcing the other in ways that would later require deliberate separation to fully understand. Family, fame, and the cost of absence. As career demands intensified, family life became increasingly complex. Parenthood introduced emotional stakes that existed alongside professional obligations. The challenge was not absence of care, but fragmentation of attention. Time, once flexible, became structured around production cycles, leaving limited space for continuity in domestic life. This created internal conflict that persisted even during periods of success. Fame amplified this tension by introducing public perception into private reality. From the outside, success appeared cohesive. From within, it often felt divided. The emotional labor required to maintain comedic performance while managing personal responsibility created a dual existence that was difficult to reconcile. Over time, the recognition that professional achievement had coincided with personal distance became unavoidable. Yet this realization did not diminish the significance of her work. Instead, it complicated it. The legacy of the show became inseparable from the sacrifices embedded within its production. Family relationships evolved in the context of this tension, shaped by both admiration and absence. In this phase, success, and cost were no longer separate narratives but interwoven realities, each informing the other in ways that could not be easily disentangled. After the final bow and the persistence of memory, when the final episode concluded, it marked not an end to identity but a transition into reflection. The conclusion of a major creative era often reveals what sustained it, and in this case, it was endurance shaped by early instability. Stepping away from the structure of weekly performance allowed space for reassessment of both achievement and personal history. The legacy of Carol Burnett Show persisted not only in awards or cultural memory, but in its influence on television comedy structure and performance expectations. Yet beyond public legacy lay private continuity, the childhood experiences, early losses, and formative environments that had never fully disappeared, only been transformed into creative output. Aging introduced new dimensions to reflection, including awareness of time, loss, and resilience. Rather than diminishing relevance, this stage emphasized continuity of presence. The laughter that once functioned as survival mechanism became part of historical memory shared by audiences across generations. What remains is not a singular narrative of triumph or hardship, but an integrated life in which both coexist. The persistence of memory ensures that neither success nor suffering exists in isolation, but as intertwined elements of a life continuously interpreted through performance, resilience, and the enduring human capacity to transform pain into expression.